Hi, everybody. Lisa here with Do Something Indy. And our show tonight is one that just kind of guilty pleasure for myself. I'm talking with another fellow artist, but after doing some digging and research on him, I think we could potentially be kindred spirits. He's been described as a rabble rouser. Yeah, if you didn't know that about me, got that in my spirit. So watch out. But Ken Avidor is an old school sketch artist. He's done his share of courtroom sketches, comic sketches, things like that. And we're going to talk to him about some of the things he's passionate about, his art, and just a little bit more about him. So, producer Johnny, bring on the guests.
Hello, John and Lisa.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
Well, awesome right now because I'm on your show.
That's a loaded question. I asked you that earlier and you gave me a different answer. And so I'm so grateful that you're happy to be on the show tonight.
Oh, and I'm a big fan of the mouthwash show. Great to be here.
Good. Thank you. Okay. So you are a sketch artist. Describe your medium because so many artists these days are going digital. They're using Procreate on an iPad or things like that. But you do this old school, right?
That's correct. And there's a group called, and I've been with them for quite a while, called Urban Sketchers, and
Hmm.
there's a local group called Indy Urban Sketchers. And the whole idea of urban sketching is to sketch on site, not use
Okay.
photographs. And so you have to have equipment that can get an immediate look, and that's similar to what I used to do in courtroom. So very simply and basically, it's I use Strathmore gray tone paper, and I use ink, usually pens, and colored paper pencils like oh the usual ones, Prismacolor, Cretacolor, but I I have all kinds of things like folding chairs, portable stuff. So it's something that I've been doing for a while, and I can work very fast.
So that is a key word, fast. So when I did some research on you and I read about your court sketches, one of the stories that I read said something like you were hoping that the verdict wouldn't come in so quickly so that you could get all of the sketches done in time, right? Because the look of the room is going to change quickly, right? If a verdict comes in quickly. So, how do you approach the timing perspective of what you choose to sketch that day? Because what you sit down to sketch may very well change in 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question, by the way. And there's a little bit of now I do everything, like I said, everything's on site, no cameras involved, but I do a little bit of fakery. So what I
Okay.
do, the first thing I do is I do a rough pencil sketch, and then I ink it, and then I color that in. But all the while, I'm looking at things that could change, and in a courtroom, it could be a lot of things. So I have a bunch of tricks. I won't go into them right now, but
Yeah.
when I'm sketching a person, for instance, and that's a little different. I like sketching people. That's one of my things, and I do. I'll have to sketch you and John sometime. But
We would love it. I would be honored.
well, the reason one another reason why I like to do things in person is particularly with portraits, and they're not caricatures; they're sketches. Is that when you work from a photograph, you're drawing a photograph. You're not drawing the person. But
Hmm.
when I'm in front of a person, and Roberta and I had this gig for a while where we were at Luger Plaza, and an outfit called Big Car. You've probably heard of them.
I know Big Car, yes.
They paid us to draw people free sketches. They would get sketches for free, and nobody comes out of the city county building looking happy. they've been in there getting restraining orders and all
Oh.
kinds of things like that. Some
Or they could be there to turn in petition signatures like what John and I did. We've been there many, many times.
it's generally not a happy place. And those people would
Right.
come out and they'd see this banner saying free sketches, and they'd sit down. And over the course of, I don't know, half an hour that I would sketch them, I got to learn about their lives, and
Yeah.
that would inform the sketch. So a lot of people would say, almost always, they would say, "Oh, I'm not looking great today," and I said, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to make you into a movie star." I always took, like, depending on the person, of course, like 20 years off of them. And you know
Yeah.
something? Do you know how, like, when you look at a photograph or you look in the mirror in the morning, you say, "I don't know that person."
Right.
But when I'm happy to say that when I gave them the sketch, they looked at it and said, "That's me." And that's because
Oh,
they told me about themselves, and I told them a little bit. It was just a wonderful experience, and every time I
yeah.
sketch people, I always have that wonderful experience. Yeah, sometimes I had to fill in, like, they didn't have all their teeth, and they didn't. I gave it to them, and they'd have all their teeth in the
Yeah.
drawing. They never said, "That's not me. I am missing teeth." They said, "No, that's me. That's how I see myself," and I think
In
that's
their heart, that's how they see themselves, right?
right. And I
Yeah.
think that a really good piece of art, and this was like in before photographs, people sat for portraits.
Yeah.
So I think that was always a given, that people would talk while they were having their portrait done.
Right. Okay, so I have to interject something here. I did not even think about the fact that this conversation could go this way because I didn't know that about you. But I was going to a farmer's market years ago, and I can't remember if this was before or after I'd met John. And actually, it was after because I had taken some of his pottery to sell at this market, and so I got there early. I'm setting up, and I'm about finished setting up, and this old German man shows up with his easel and his sketch pad and all of his charcoal pencils, and he looks at me and he says, "You're in my spots." And he was so angry. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, "I can move over." And he says, "Oh, you must move." And so I scooted over. I wanted to be nice. I'm going to be sitting next to this man all day. So I wanted him to be my friend. But so I watched him do sketch portraits of everyone that came through. And because I was just a bit behind him, I could see what he was sketching in addition to seeing them. And I was amazed at what he was capturing. And so we get halfway through the day, and by then I'd made a good friend out of this man, even though he was angry with me at first. And he says, "I haven't sketched a beautiful lady in a long time. Can I sketch you?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so selfishly all day, I was hoping that I could get him to do a sketch of me. But like you said, I felt like I was in my worst. I hadn't washed my hair that day. I was very disheveled. And he says, "Oh no, I will capture you." And so as I was sitting in a chair, I was watching people walk behind him to see what he was sketching and then look at me, and they were going, and I'm thinking, "Oh dear goodness, I hope that really looks like me and that it's not some crazy." And then he handed it to me and he didn't charge me. And he just was the sweetest man, and it looked exactly like me. It just was eerie to look at it. So I would love to have you come do that at an event for us sometime because I think there's nothing like seeing yourself as a reflection of how someone else sees you. And then,
Oh, absolutely. And it's
yeah,
now I went to art school in New York, Parsons School of Design, and that's where I met Roberta. Uh,
yeah,
and we both had the same teacher, Sandy Cosson. I think he's in his 90s. Um, but he was a wonderful teacher, and he taught drawing, but
hmm,
he taught it like a drill sergeant. He was merciless. He would tell you, "You're terrible. You're doing it all wrong." But he had
yeah,
But his main thing, and always, whenever I draw, I always feel like Sandy's sitting on my shoulder. The main thing Sandy said was, don't draw what you see, draw what you feel about what you see.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because we're not cameras and we don't
Yeah.
process information that way. Um, so I'm very interested in perception, and of course that gets me into the political thing, which we might want to talk
Yeah.
about later.
And that was gonna that good comment. That was gonna be my segue. So I would describe what I've seen of your work as let's see, Dr. Seuss meets Gary Varvel and let's see, who was the other one? There was another one that so it was like a threesome of artists because so uh, compared to Dr. Seuss, it's very animated, but with a political bent and a lot more detail. I mean, a lot more detail. Like just to look at what's in your background um, on your screen, there's just so much detail there. And then the Gary Varvel part is a little more caricaturish, but I don't think your work is caricaturish at all. Um, but I also feel like it goes back to those old school courtroom sketches. And I'm not going to share my age. You revealed that you're retired now, so you're doing a lot of these things because it's what you still love to do. But I can recall back in the day seeing Walter Cronkite talking about some big courtroom case, and what they show on the screen is not images of the courtroom, but the sketches that the sketch artist had done for the day. So with all that said, tell me what interested you in art, number one, as a young man, and number two, what took you down that more political kind of making a difference and shedding light on human nature and the things that are going on in the world. So those two things.
Well, that's I'll try to condense this.
Okay.
Well, someone asked me today. They said, "How long have you been drawing?" That's a question I always get, and the answer is, everyone when they were children drew.
Yeah.
But I didn't stop. Most people stop drawing, so
Right.
there's that. And then I always used to, when I was in school, I always used to get in trouble, usually for my drawings. And I wish we had time to tell the, well, I won't tell that story. But I would frequently get in trouble and get sent to the principal for doing a drawing. Or, well, actually, I did sculpture too, and that got me in trouble too. It was they had, remember plasticine, that stuff, that green stuff that smelled really good. It was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, so I figured out that I could make a hollow monster, and you could put food in his mouth, and if you rattled him, it would come out his butt. And everyone I showed that to, all my friends thought it was awesome, and I showed them how to do it. I called it Poop Monster, and soon everyone in the school was making poop monsters, and it was outlawed, it was banned, it was censored, and I got sent to the principal on that one.
So I want to interrupt you real quick. So we've had a guy on our show who was sent to the principal's office and then like disciplined heavily for tattooing on kids' arms in elementary school with a Sharpie because they were paying him their lunch money to do so because he was so good. And so now he's a nationally known graffiti artist and owns a tattoo shop, and so he's made a career out of it. And we were trying to stifle that in our education system. And it sounds like you experienced the same thing.
The same thing. And probably the turning point for me was, and it's one of my favorite stories, but I'll condense it very quickly. Me and some friends had heard of something called Playboy magazine. This goes back quite a ways. And so we came up with our own version of it. Somebody left it on a tray and put it into the hole in the wall where the lunch ladies clean up, and we forgot about it because we were working on issue number 2, and very excited. Um, I was the art director of that enterprise. We got called into the principal's office, and he had our copy of our version of Playboy on his desk, and he said, yeah, he didn't say young men, he said, boys, you've done a terrible thing. And we were all kind of scared, in the principal's office. And he says, that lunch lady, the gal, the old gal with the blue hair, she took one look at this and it nearly gave her a heart attack.
Oh, no.
So the first thought I had was, oh no. And then the second thought I had was, I have this power. So I've been, yeah, it's, you've heard of Thomas Nast. He was a artist around, turn of the century.
Mhm.
He did 2 things that were really awesome. He invented what we currently think of when we think of Santa Claus, the plump guy with the pipe.
Right.
That's Thomas Nast. Before that, there was all these different ways of looking at it. So he created that image. The other thing he did was he did political cartoons about Tammany Hall in New York, which was a very corrupt institution. And there was a very round guy who was in charge of it, and eventually he got justice. But these terrible, nasty pictures of him, and the character whose name I kind of forget right now, but he was asked once. So he says, like, I don't care what the newspapers write about me because my constituents can't read. They're immigrants. He says, but those cartoons, they're killing me. So that's the power of art. Art does have power.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Well, I do want to touch on how you took that creative urge, as that kid who was the rabble rouser early in life, into what you're doing now, because what you're doing now is documenting a lot of really critical moments in history. And while I really don't, I don't want to talk about the political topics themselves, but I want to talk about the art that has been inspired by those things. So I'll throw out a few examples: COVID, vaccines, masks. So I don't want to talk about the topics, but how you were inspired to create. You have an amazing YouTube channel with all of these amazing pieces of art that you are turning into like online comics, basically. So how did that happen?
That's a great question, and it's because I keep journals. That's one thing. I don't know if you know that. I have journals that go all the way back to journals that have word. I had sketchbooks and I had written journals, and I was part of a project that combined them in the year 2000. Since then, I've had, and they look like this. And
Oh, wow.
so
Yeah.
this one's the current one. So you know, oh, it's kind of breaking up, but they
Yeah.
have people.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, if you come to the studio, I'll show those. Uh, so I tried to document what's going on, and
Hmm.
that's not really the approach of many artists, particularly urban sketcher. When I always felt that if some really big historical thing happened, uh, I would be there sketching it and
Yeah.
putting my journal and making films. That's something I didn't mention, is that I use my sketches because I can work fairly quickly. I use them to make not animated, animatic films, short ones.
Yeah. I've seen it. I saw a couple of those today. So that's basically your sketches. So they're not animated. It's a singular sketch. with the storyline behind it, and then it changes to the next sketch. Is that what you're describing?
Right. It's sort of like turning the reading from a book and turning the pages as you're
Right. Yeah.
doing it, as opposed to a animated cartoon. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, they've been in a couple of film festivals, and I'm working on another one. Um, the one I'm currently working on is the third courier. It doesn't have words. It just has music, soundtrack, and the drawings, and hopefully it conveys the story. Uh,
Yeah.
so the third one's going to have it's the third one's going, and they're all very bleak, depressing, and so if you're having a bad day, don't watch them.
Well, okay, so we talked about this backstage before we came on. You said that a lot of your work is very dark and depressing and all that, but what I said to you from what I've seen is that you are sharing dark things, but you're shedding light on those dark things that need to be discussed. There are things that need to be talked about and need to be in our purview and not pushed aside. So I commend you for doing that, because I can only imagine that has to be emotional for you, depending on the topic and the season, right?
Yes, I would say, yeah. I'm of Russian extraction, so it's in my blood to be dark, depressed,
Yeah.
and bleak. Uh, but if it's just another aspect of the human experience to to dwell on that sort of existence. Uh, I'm not Hallmark happy, Hallmark family hour. It's not.
Yeah.
But there, yeah, it's, and I'm not hugely popular. I mean, one of the comments that I got on one of my films was, "This film makes me want to slit my wrists."
Oh,
Yeah, I don't think the person meant it. You know, I didn't call the suicide hotline. It meant that
yeah.
it made him really depressed, and I went,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. That's the
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that means that you are depicting a time or a scenario or a topic that hits hot buttons with people, or maybe makes them think. He said it made him want to slit his wrist, but because it is such a downer kind of thing. So last week, um, I do florals for weddings, and a couple of weeks ago, my couple, the now wife is an IMPD beat officer, and then the now husband is a SWAT officer. And the week of their wedding was when the body cam footage was released of the murder that had happened, or the homicide that had happened early in August, officer on civilian. And so I told her, I said, my heart has been really heavy for you this week, because I know that footage came out this week and it's the week of your wedding. It should be the happiest time of your life. You've been in my prayers. And she's like, oh my gosh, I appreciate that so much. And then she revealed that, and I didn't know this at the time, but her husband is a SWAT officer. And so the whole SWAT team was at their wedding that day. And she's like, we've just been praying that no riots are happening and, no craziness happens, because the entire SWAT team is at our wedding. And so those are the human things that a lot of people don't think about when we have tragedy like that in communities and in cities. And you're putting a pencil or a pen to those kinds of things to create that moment in time in art, whether it's positive or not, which I think is just so necessary. And as artists, I think we need to think about depicting those things, not just the happy sunshines, flowers, unicorns, but the things that are happening in our communities every day. Um, so how are you? Let me back up. What were you doing on 9/11?
It was probably some art thing, yes. And I
Mm-hmm.
was doing a weekly cartoon at that time, and my cartoon about 9/11 was that I felt that something had fundamentally changed in
Yeah.
this country, and that there would be, what I showed was the two towers burning, and on one side there was people with signs that said, that they wanted peace, and on the other side, there are people who wanted to go to war. And we've been
Mm.
kind of on a war footing ever since. And
Yeah.
so I've done a kind of a follow-up on that for the publication La Décroissance. That's who I do artwork for now. They're in France. And it showed a conveyor belt, um, and a kind of a machine that was transforming people on the conveyor belt. And on the left, you see them with the signs. These are lefty kind of people. They have signs that say "Save the whales" and "No more nukes." And they go through the machine and they come out and their signs are saying, you know, let's go to war with Putin and that sort of thing. And that's gotten a lot of. I put that on the Twitter, and a lot of people respond to that. It's so odd to me now that there's so many people who want to go to war, and I find that deeply troubling. A lot of my artwork now is about
Yeah.
World War III. I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, how do people find you? And what do you want people to know about you the most?
Hmm, interesting question. Well, first of all, I have two two accounts on what used to be called Twitter. It's now called X. So if you want to see what I'm ranting about politically or otherwise, it's at Avidor, Avidor. I think it's right under my name.
Yeah.
But there's also the Bicyclopolis account, and that's just the art. Now, Bicyclopolis was a graphic novel, also published in France. You can't get it here, but that has all my art, and it's also I have two YouTube channels. One is Ken Avidor. Uh, it has most of my artwork, but also my films, and Bicyclopolis has other films too. So it's two ways, two things you can, two ways. And I have a Substack where you can, again, it's both art and my political stuff, particularly the city council stuff that I've been writing lately. Uh,
Yeah. And when I looked at that today, I was like, "Oh, I'm not on that list. Maybe that's a good thing."
well, I try to write about, and I try to do artwork. My artwork is always on site. So when I write about things, I try to write about what I know, what I'm experiencing firsthand. So
Mhm.
you're not going to see me writing very much about, you know, the international scene or even, presidential politics, because there's other people who do that very well, and I don't have any expertise there. But I do have expertise on what I see firsthand. For instance, in the city council race, I have met both candidates in the 13th district and have sketched both of them,
Yeah.
and have gotten to know both of them. And so, oddly enough, I think this is a very interesting race. You can read about it on my Substack. It's Avidor Gazette. Uh, the interesting thing is that for me is that I'm the only one writing about it at this point. So,
Yeah.
but that's happened before. That's happened before. Uh, some people think, oh, Ken, they try to guess my politics, which is weird,
Yeah.
uh, because I'm not into isms. It's hard to, I, but I have muckraked about. Well, there was a Green Party city councilman in Minneapolis who turned out to be quite corrupt, and I was at his trial and did a drawing of him, a couple of drawings, but there was that. Many stories about that. But a rather more famous Republican, she, you might have heard of her. Um, she's, let's see, can you see this book? Ah, there you go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a book that I co-authored. Um, it came about because, again, I was blogging about her with some other people. We thought she was just so bizarre. And then she became a congresswoman, and then she ran for president. Um, and it was one of those situations where the the national press went looking for someone who wrote about her, and we were
Hmm.
it. Bloggers. The mainstream
Yeah.
press didn't think she was that interesting. Um, but what we saw was actually, yeah, we looked beneath the kind of flamboyant character of Michelle Bachmann, and we found underneath corruption, which
Yeah.
related to that trial, the trial of Tom Petters. She got money from Frank Venice, but you can read about that in the book. It's called.
He's the one that I found the article about you that called you a rabble rouser today.
Oh, the article. Yeah, I know that
Yeah.
article. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Tom Petters. You remember in 2008 there was a financial crisis. Remember that?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, what happened was that because money just kind of evaporated. It's sort of like when a lake evaporates. So you see all this like bodies and things lying around on skeletons
Hmm.
in cars and tires. Uh, what surfaced was Ponzi schemes, and so his was one of the first Ponzi schemes to become evident, obvious, because he couldn't find money. You have to keep putting money into Ponzi schemes. So he held the record for Ponzi schemes in America for all of 1 week. 3.6 billion dollars was the record. He held it for 1 week, and then this guy Bernie Madoff came along, and he didn't have the record anymore.
Yeah.
Bernie
Yeah.
sold 10 billion.
Oh my goodness. Oh
But
my goodness.
it was an interesting trial, and there was a character involved, and he was. But people, one of the great things I love about uh, Dan Stock was his talking about how the donors are now in charge of politics, and quite a few of these donors are crooked. In this case, they're
Yeah.
the donors, and they can. Tom Petters contributed money to Democrats, and Frank Venice, his accomplice, donated to Republicans. So they had that division, but it was the same pool of money. The money,
Yeah.
but the money wasn't theirs. It's sort of like that Sam, what is his name? The fellow who was doing the Bitcoin kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, and then there was a guy here in Indianapolis too who is now serving a lot of prison time for taking a lot of people's money.
It's it's
Well, okay, so
it's really an easy thing to be a philanthropist when you're using other
yeah,
people's money.
absolutely. Okay, so the second question was, I think, I'm old too. I
Yeah.
forget.
Did
So
we get off on a tangent?
I think we did. So what do you want people to know about you? And we talked about where they can find you, but what is Ken Avidor's heart like in your art, in your work? You're obviously touching on topics that need to be talked about. So what do you want people to know about the Ken, deep down inside?
Uh, I guess that's a hard question to answer. I like what I really like about my art is interacting with people. By the way, I don't just do sketches. I do the films. I do the sketches, but I also do chalk drawing. So um, what I like to do is interact with people as I'm drawing. That's the most fun thing
Yeah.
for me. So when I'm doing chalk drawing, um, I'm right there in the street. People walk up. People walk right through
Yeah.
my chalk drawing. That's fine. It's ephemeral. And
Yeah.
that's the really kind of thing about all my art really is it's here today, gone tomorrow. I don't think of it as something that's permanent and great like Michelangelo. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a different kind of when I do chalk drawing, it can be blown away by the wind or it could be rained upon. But in the moment that I'm doing it, talking to people and hearing what they have to say is meeting new people. It's
Yeah.
like meeting you right here.
Yeah.
That's the most fun is the interaction between me, my art, and the people who appreciate it. And that gets into if we can talk a little bit about the horror for me of the last 3 years was not being able when they did the lockdown.
Yeah.
when they wouldn't let us talk to one another, because I
Yeah.
love talking to people. Not always people. I love people who not necessarily I agree with, but I love learning from other people, and the
Yeah.
best way is
I
to
do too.
talk.
Yeah.
Take
So
that away from.
I do I want to park that for a second because I do want to talk about that, but I want to go back to the chalk art part because I saw a lot of that today when I was doing my research on you. And my husband happens to be a really great chalk artist as well.
Ooh.
Uh, he doesn't do it much. He's only done it for our campaigns and stuff, but he's really, really good. And what I love about chalk art is it's in the moment, you see it, and like you said, it can be rained away the next day, but for that period of time it shows either a beautiful image or an amazing message or what have you. And I loved the images of your work that I saw, and that's actually what took my mind to the Dr. Seuss. Your letters are very carefully drafted and almost looks like reading the characters in a Dr. Seuss book. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. So that's another thing that I'd love to have you do for us sometime is do a chalk art something in Mars Hill. But let's go back to that interaction, that relational part of it, the people part of it. Um, I think a lot of artists are introverts and don't have um, that desire, that need to interact with people. They are more about creating their art. So, how has it been for you to kind of meld those two? So you're spending a lot of time in yourself doing your art, but then you're also interacting with the people that you're doing it for.
Well, one thing that really helps is I draw every day, and I try to when I not everybody can draw and talk with someone at the same time. That's very
Yeah,
difficult, and that comes with experience. So, but I really enjoy, like I said, it becomes second nature after a while. But it's that, and I understand why there's um, not all art is like my art. There's different kinds of art. Uh, my art really does depend on the experience, the people I'm with, the place, and all the interactions of all of that. I become part of the scene. Um,
yeah,
so it's a fun thing. It's just a fun thing, and it goes and you never. It's sort of like this interview. It goes different ways, and
yeah,
um, you can be afraid of that, but I actually embrace uncertainty. Uh, I want to know what's next, and
yeah,
whatever's next, I want to get that on paper, particularly my journal. My
yeah.
journals, especially the journals of the last 3 years. Um, well, those are I think of them as historical documents.
Hmm.
The ones that I did in Minnesota, by the way, are in the Minnesota History Center. They're archived. Um,
So you're really great at leading me into my next question because I already had that in my mind, and here you are just talking about it anyway. So, what is your plan for those documents of the last 3 years? Those images, those journals, because that needs to be memorialized somewhere once you're gone.
for now, they're in my studio, and
Yeah,
people every first Friday, the artists there. Not all of them do it, but and you're required to open up your studio most of the time. But I like being open every first Friday. Roberta's studio is open pretty much every first Friday, and I just love interacting with people. And one of the things that people want to see are those journals. Uh,
yeah,
Sometimes people come in who I have Dan Stock in one of my journals. I think I have Ashley Grog. I
yeah.
have the last weekend we had the Children's Health Defense bus come through
Hmm.
Indianapolis, and they were at the parking lot of the CCIC, and I did chalk drawings for them. Uh,
I saw those today.
I love those people helped me get through the terrible time of
Yeah.
2020 and 2021 to 20, those 3 years. Wonderful people. I mean, I can't say enough about them. Um, but some of those people I had in my journals, and I just, when they came up to the studio, I said, here you are when you were speaking in front of the State House. And
Yeah.
so I have the Dan Stock is in there, and that Robert Children's Self Defense is Robert Kennedy Jr.'s.
Right.
I think he founded it, but he was at a few months ago. He was at the Meridian Hills Country Club, and Robert and I got tickets to see him talk. And of course, he's in my journal.
Of course. Of
So
course.
it's and so we were talking about the 13th district council race. So I have you're going to have Libby Glass on. I've sketched her, and
Yeah.
I sketched Jesse Brown. So I have. It's a historical thing for me, and getting that. And if I get a good likeness, I'm pretty excited. That's where I get my excitement from.
Well, I think this is a great place to end because I want to end on a really good high note, not a dark note, but a high note. And I want to encourage people to come out to see you and Roberta on the first Fridays. So tell us again where your studio is, just for the benefit of our viewers.
Okay, we're on, and if you go to my Instagram, it's Avidor Art. I usually have an announcement, but it's I don't know the exact number, but it's Brookside Avenue. It's on the near east side. It's a big building, but go into the entrance that has the black marble. It's a red building with black marble. If you go in any other entrance, they'll never find you. It'll be years later they'll find the dry husk of you. It's an enormous building, and it's like a rat maze. But we're on the second floor of the Circle City Industrial Complex, the first Friday of every month. I'm way in the back. There's a lot of other good artists there, so and it's like a party. So and John's been there. You haven't been there, but John's.
I haven't been. I need to come. I definitely need to come.
And my studio is kind of like, I like to think of my studio as a free speech zone. So people come in and they tell me things. It's so exciting, and I just love to hear what people think. My art is all over the walls.
Yeah.
Sometimes I show the films on an old computer, but it's the best. The best thing for me is to have. Artists need people who appreciate the art. They need, I make films, and when I have an audience, nothing's better than sitting in a theater. And I've only experienced this just a few times, sitting in a theater watching my films, and when you hear the audience gasp at the right time, or go,
or the new
it's the best thing. And and even if people go, oh, this is terrible, this is horrible, I haven't gotten that, but I expect that. I don't expect people to love my stuff, but particularly if they're watching.
Well, but as artists, though, that's why we do it. Like, we want people to appreciate what we're creating, right? So the bride that I mentioned to you, that's the police officer, when she first walked in and saw the flowers, she's like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have my makeup on. I'm going to cry, and so that's like the best feeling for me, because I want that to be like an amazingly special part of their day. But I think we do the art for ourselves, but we also do it for other people.
It's an ecosystem.
Yes, it is. And I can't wait to see yours in person, live and in person.
Well, looking forward to it, and looking forward to visiting you folks out in Mars Hill. So
Mars Hill. And so when you come to the Mars Hill Art Center, and I have my shirt on with all my paint splatter, we have a couple of walls in our entrance where, when guests come for the first time, we have all different colored Sharpies. And so you are to sign the wall. And so we have all of these amazing signatures, and some people have put quotes, some people have put messages, some people just sign their names, but we would be honored to include your name and Roberta's in our Wall of Fame. So
we'll certainly do it, and the honor will be ours as well.
Thank you so much, Ken. This has been such an inspiring conversation. You make me want to get my sketch pad out and draw. In fact, I'm going to have to send you a picture at the art center on the wall. I used to take my dad's old woodworking stuff and use it to make things as a kid. And I took an old piece of wood that's probably like 12 by 12, and I drew my head with my hair and eyes and a mouth. And at the top, I think I was 5 when I did this. And I put, "This is Lisa."
Those are the
And I
best
have
ones.
it
Those,
have it hanging on the wall.
the-
But I can't draw a nose to save my life.
that's awesome. Well, this is fantastic, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for joining me. You guys have a fantastic night.
Thank you.